This is Street Knowledge with Chris Graham.
Welcome to the podcast, Chris Graham. Later in the show, we'll have Rod Mullins talking NASCAR with us. In fact, we'll finish up with Rod here on today's podcast. We're going to start with some UVA sports news, and not a lot of news today, but we will talk some baseball news. Tanner Morris taken in the 5th round of the Major League Baseball draft. Toronto Blue Jays, 147th overall. This is good news for Tanner Morris. 5th round picks. Boy, they can. In last year's the bonus slot was the 147th pick was worth a $354,000 bonus, and so this is good for Tanner. He was a draft eligible sophomore this year. That means he, to go into the Major League draft. Couple routes. You don't have to go to college. You can be drafted out of high school. You can be drafted if you're a JUCO player after either of your years. I think that's still the case. I do know that for the guys who do go to a 4-year school, if you go to the 4-year school, you can't then be drafted until you're 3 years out of high school. So unlike the NBA, where you have to go for at least 1 year of post high school something, whatever that may be. You can go straight out of high school. You're going to play rookie ball and travel on buses, play in some backwater towns, and a lot of the more talented players these days are actually going the college route. You travel better, you still develop, and you can skip a couple of those levels of bad travel and no meal money and all that kind of stuff, being thrown to the wolves in that sense. So Morris, now he's a native of nearby Crozet, nearby to me and nearby to UVA. Crozet is sort of in the middle, actually, between where I'm located in Waynesboro and Charlottesville. So Morris, he was Virginia's top hitter in 2019. So this is bad news for UVA baseball because, I don't know, 5th round pick. I mean, you can improve. You can also fall back. And $354,000 is a lot to turn down. And I'm sure the pick, the value of that pick will fluctuate a little bit, but that gives you an indication where it was last year. It's going to be somewhere in that vicinity, maybe higher this year. But top hitter in 2019, 345 batting average, 70 team best. These are all team best numbers for EVA. 345 batting average, 77 hits, 21 doubles, 5 homers. It's tough to hit home runs in Davenport. It's a big stadium, pitcher's friendly park. Slugging percentage of .507. When you consider only 5 home runs and a .507 slugging percentage, that's solid. And an on base plus slugging of .959, on base percentage 452, and so he was all ACC, all freshman, or ACC all freshman last year. He was 3rd-team all ACC at shortstop this year. So a shortstop who can hit, who's got power, he's not going to be around, I would imagine. I'm not speaking out of turn here, I hope, but it's going to be hard to imagine. If I were advising the young man, I'd say take it. You've finished 3 years of school. You're a year away from getting your degree from UVA, which is very important. But you go to college to get a job, and this is a job. And $350K with a chance, with a rebuilding organization. Toronto's been a little perpetually rebuilding the last few years. But hey, you're a 5th round pick. That means they think something of you. And now he does have a little bit of leverage. Actually, he has a good bit of leverage as a draft-eligible sophomore. He can go back in the draft next year and still then go back a 3rd time. The draft-eligible sophomore route is not so bad in that sense, but, the clock is ticking. He is junior age, and, Major League teams do look a little differently at guys every year they get older. So he's got some leverage. The team has a little bit of leverage. Still, we'll see how it plays out. I would imagine it plays out with Morris probably going the route of taking the bonus offered, as long as it's in that range that we've heard, certainly. And I would imagine that it probably is. So let's see what we can get into here. Now, so changing gears, we're going to talk some wrestling. And we're going to talk about an interview that Jon Moxley, the former Dean Ambrose, did. He's done a lot. He's talked with everybody but me, pretty much, it seems like, in the last week. The Chris Jericho, we in fact covered that yesterday. But the Jon Moxley interview with Wade Keller I guess different parts are coming out based on the conversation. I mean, I thought that I haven't listened to the entire Wade Keller interview. It's lengthy. It came out in a couple parts, actually. I did get to listen to the entire. I was on my way to Virginia Beach last week and got to listen on the drive down to the Chris Jericho one. So I relied a bit on the transcript from 411mania.com. Definitely recommend that you listen. I'm going to try to finish up listening to the Wade Keller interview. And you can read the transcripts in 411mania.com. I mean, the folks there, I know how hard it is to transcribe an interview. It's hard. They did a good job. And what I wanted to get into was, to me, the most fascinating thing that Moxley talked about, really in both the interviews that I've been able to listen to in full or in part and then read, was talking about the walk up to WrestleMania 32, the match that he had with Brock Lesnar. And, the interesting thing to me, the more it kind of sunk in. I mean, when I first listened, when I first read the transcript too, after listening, it was really, this was the magician revealing his secrets. And it was so interesting to see and hear him talking. He was, in essence, he was shooting, if you want to call it shooting on Brock Lesnar, about how Brock Lesnar is so disengaged from the process. But really, to me, what I got out of it wasn't the shooting on Lesnar as much as it was shooting on the process. Things that you don't think about, but as soon as you hear them, you're like, yeah, this makes sense. The match, first off, was a street fight. You remember, it didn't come off very well, as it turns out, and we found out why. But basically the reason it didn't come off was because Lesnar, I don't know if I want to call it refused to participate in the planning process. He just didn't participate. Like, didn't think it was important to go over the match. Thought they could call it live in the ring. I hope I'm not spoiling wrestling for some of you listening right now. If you're hanging on to listen to our talk with Rod Mullins later on. But yeah, the matches are definitely scripted. You knew that. I mean. But not only are they scripted, as to who wins, in WWE these days, we learned through this process, the matches are really choreographed. And I use that term intentionally. I work with, our company, Augusta Free Press. In addition to being a news company, we also work with a theater, a local theater company, the Wayne Theater, that puts on shows. They book acts, but they also produce in-house their own musicals. They buy the rights and produce their own musicals. And choreography. I mean, this is when you think about, Moxley talked about, for example, this was a street fight. It's not a match you can just call in the ring. It's a street fight at WrestleMania. So when you talk about a street fight, you're not talking about a conventional match, with arm drags and working a body part and figure four leg locks and suplexes and things like that. You're talking about some of those moves, certainly a lot of those moves, but you're also talking about table spots, maybe some weapons, if you want to say, trash can lid or, kendo stick or things like that. And, I guess it makes sense to hear him say, we've got to get stunts approved and set up. We've got to get props for table bumps, whatever we're going to do. That's a quote. I didn't think of it that way, but you've got to get them approved. And I wrote in a column today, and I'd advise you to click on the column. You can kind of see what I'm thinking as you're hearing it right now. I've always thought, and my wife, when my wife watches wrestling with me, she's a relative late convert, if you can call her even a convert to watching wrestling. I think she more tolerates me when we watch it together than that she's a fan of it. But she'll ask the obvious question that wrestling fans don't ask, like, why is that table there? Why is that kendo stick there? And, I always, we've worked behind the scenes in wrestling. I've noted before, I think I've, noted quite often that I worked with a company that actually put on a live pay-per-view event. I was part of the creative team. I was a head writer, and I've been a promoter in pro wrestling. It's amazing to think that, that I did that. But, now it's been a few years since I was involved in that, but it was a lot of fun, of course. I always, when she asked that question, well, we've been there when they set the ring up, if the matches start at 7:30 when we were working shows, the ring crew sets the ring up around 10, 11 in the morning, and they're there, and there's chaos. I mean, there's people setting chairs up for ringside, and there's all the stuff going on. And so I've always said, okay, logically, to explain this away, the reason that there's a table under the ring is, they have tables that they put stuff on when they're setting everything up, and they just slide it under the ring when they're done, and that just makes logical sense, right? So that's how I've always explained that away. That doesn't explain away the kendo sticks and the sledgehammers, the sledgehammer that Triple H uses and that kind of thing. I guess a sledgehammer maybe to hit something to make the ring stronger or something. I don't know. There's probably some logic there, but yeah, the idea that they have to get this stuff approved. Yeah, I guess so. It makes sense. Didn't think about it that way. Got to get it approved. And so. Next that I really thought was interesting, the idea that the match itself is something that has to be worked out by sort of a committee, including the wrestlers and writers. He talked about this Lesnar match from WrestleMania 32. They had a conference call, which, again, wow, a conference call. Michael Hayes, Jamie Noble, Brock Lesnar, Paul Heyman, and then Moxley, then going by the wrestling name Dean Ambrose. A conference call on Wednesday before WrestleMania that Sunday. He wasn't in Dallas yet. This is the Dallas, the Cowboy Stadium WrestleMania. So I'm just in Dallas waiting. None of my ideas are approved yet. Brock hasn't even heard any of my ideas because he doesn't care, hasn't been around. They lay out matches by conference call. That's so interesting. I mean, I'm sure, again, the going back to the pay-per-view I worked on, we wrote out things. No question we did. We didn't just say, you guys wrestle and figure it out. We told them the end. We wrote sort of the storylines for our announcers. We kind of created the backstory as to why these guys didn't like each other and why they were working against each other, that kind of thing. But we had them doing interviews. I was actually not only writing the basic plot points, but then filming too. And editing. I mean, it was a small company. We wanted to be bigger, and we never got bigger, unfortunately. But we were doing all that stuff. But we didn't tell the wrestlers what to say in their interviews. And two, when it got to the night of the matches, we determined the finishes, we being the creative team. But finish is what we told from ring entrance to the finish. That was something that the workers worked out. That's what the wrestlers worked out. They figured that out. So. But here, not the case. I mean, it's something where, there's a team and you have to have approval from producers, and we've heard that and we've kind of known that. But again, seeing it in this context is interesting. Now, the next one was the one that really got me the most, how the matches are rehearsed ahead of time. And the idea that they're rehearsed, I mean, this is a quote again from Ambrose, or from Moxley. I better use his current name. At WrestleMania, you have like rehearsals. They have rings in the hotel. You don't have to do it on the day of. You put together your match, try stuff out, because everybody wants to steal the show at Mania, so you put the maximum effort in during the week. You have scheduled rehearsals. We had one scheduled rehearsal at like 11 p.m. Saturday night, the day before the show. He later talked about how some wrestlers ahead of WrestleMania matches were literally rehearsing their match for a month at the Performance Center. Wow, they rehearsed their match for a month. Again, when we did our show, maybe this is why we didn't make it as a company. I don't think that's the case. But when we did our show, we knew, and we had indicated to the guys working with us, guys and gals working with us, well ahead of time, here's where things are going. But, literally the night of the show, they were working out their matches. It was kind of like the big backstage dressing room area was just full of, groups of 2 and 4 tag team matches, working out what they were going to do, and then they would, call it live in the ring. So there was no rehearsal. They didn't actually work the matches, in advance. They just worked them out a bit. But these matches are rehearsed in some cases up to a month ahead of time. Wow. This is going back to a term I use a lot. It's combat theater, and that's okay. I'm not denigrating the concept. I think it's just we didn't know this to the detail that we know it now. And I don't know. I read this and I heard this over the weekend. I read this, or maybe it was yesterday, and I read this transcript that really helped it sink in yesterday, and then I read it again this morning. But I know that when I watched some matches last night, I watched a little bit of the Raw show last night, not a lot, a little bit of the Raw show last night, but I watched I concluded watching the NXT show from this weekend, and I watched it differently. I have to admit to you, I did watch it differently. It was harder to see it from the free-flowing creative kind of aspect that I thought was what I was watching. And there are matches now that, recent matches I watched. I talked yesterday on the podcast about how I thought I really expected a lot out of the Tyler Breeze match with Velveteen Dream. Two guys I like a lot. Velveteen Dream I like an awful lot, and I just thought it felt rehearsed. Now I'm reading this and saying, and after reading and letting this sink in, yeah, it felt rehearsed. It was rehearsed, but the better guys, and those are two young guys, and maybe that's why it looked rehearsed and that kind of thing. Whereas the Daniel Bryans and the AJ Styles and the Seth Rollins, those guys are more veteran guys, and even when it is rehearsed, they can overcome making it look that way. It felt like that match between Dream and Tyler Breeze was something where they were trying to remember the moves they were supposed to do next, and. The wrestling that I'm in my mid-40s, the wrestling I grew up watching, it didn't feel like they were remembering things. When you're calling it live in the ring, it one move does sort of logically lead to the next, and when you rehearse something, you're trying to remember what you did or you're supposed to do, what you did and you're supposed to do. Yeah, it can feel like, okay, we did this, what do we do next? Did I forget something? And yeah, it can feel that way. I would say the match last night, Lacey Evans and Charlotte Flair, kind of felt like it could have been rehearsed better, but it had been rehearsed, it had been scripted, and they were told what to do, and they didn't remember what they were supposed to do. And so, yeah, again, these are things that I think logically, if you're a real wrestling fan, you knew it, but now you really know it. It's something you thought you knew, now you definitely know. And so, yeah, I have to say I was a little taken aback by it was great candor, and I have to give a lot of credit to Moxley. He's a guy that's he's opening the curtain, to the business, and as wrestling fans who are knowledgeable about the business, we can still very much enjoy it, and I love it when I can suspend my disbelief. I can when a match is so good that you forget that you're watching something that is scripted and probably rehearsed and all that kind of stuff, and you just go with the flow. But I don't know. Now that I've seen how the card trick is done, I wonder how that's going to affect me in the future. And so I would definitely recommend again. And it's not going to spoil anything for you. I think it just makes you more knowledgeable, makes you maybe appreciate it better. But I would definitely recommend that you listen to some of these interviews that Moxley's doing. He's got a wild hair right now, and he's going for it. So we're going to take a break. Come right back. You probably will just hear sort of a stop and a start again. We're going to come back though with Rod Mullins. And so we've talked UVA baseball and wrestling. Now we're going to talk some NASCAR and the short track nationals from Bristol this past weekend and some more. That's coming up with Rod. So stay with us here right after this break. And we're back here on the podcast, and we're talking with Rod Mullins. We're going to talk auto racing in general. We'll talk NASCAR, obviously. We'll talk about Pocono. We'll get you ready for Michigan coming up this weekend. But first, let's start with Rod's fun day this past Saturday at Bristol Motor Speedway, the short track U.S. Nationals. And so, Rod, you had a long day, fun day, productive day. A couple guys picking up some big wins on the high banks there. Take us through the day and who the big winners were at the short track U.S. Nationals.
Well, the short track U.S. Nationals down at Bristol Motor Speedway had been a 3-day event. It's been one of those things that started on a Friday with testing. They did the same thing on Saturday, some testing and practice. And then Sunday, they culminated with all these different races. And to me, I think kind of holding that attention span with a lot of the fans and people and wanting to bring them in and see some of these races, it kind of waned a little bit after about that second day. Some people would kind of get bored with it, or you had somebody that kind of dropped out real quick or something like that. And so Bristol Motor Speedway and the people with the short track U.S. Nationals decided to go ahead and kind of compress this thing together into a 2-day event. And when they did, I think it changed things dramatically for the better with some of the racing that I saw, especially on Saturday, because they had practice time and some other things going on on that Friday, and then they had practice testing going on Saturday. But everything kicked off at around 5 o'clock on that Saturday evening. We actually went into, from the evening part into actual, down home night racing is what we went to at Bristol. And, one of the things that I wanted to see this year was Mike Skinner rebound back from last year. He had a chance at winning his part of the late model race last year, and he ended up making really what was considered to be from a lot of people, a really stupid mistake. And he ended up looking like he was going to do the same thing this time, and he rebounded back and he won really for the first time since he'd won in the Truck Series at Bristol, and he just tickled to death over it. And it was kind of the way that he thought about it the entire time that he was down there during that pro late model feature, that he was snake bit, that he would not have a chance of getting back into the winner's circle or victory lane after all of this happened. He lost a master cylinder, lost his brake fluid, really didn't have a whole lot of brakes for the entire race, but with determination, he stuck it out, and he raced probably one of the best races I think I've watched him in a long time, and he just does it for the fun of it. 62 years old, he's retired. He says he enjoys time now down in Port Orange, Florida, and he likes just sitting there by the pool and drinking wine. That's what he says he enjoys. But when his sons call him up and they tell him, hey, we've got a car this week, we've got sponsorship, he's interested in racing and everything. He says, I'm interested in it as long as it pays the bills. We have some fun along the way, and that's what he did on Saturday night. Not to mention the other guy that raced down there the other night, Stephen Nassy. He's one of these up-and-coming race car drivers. He had claimed his third win, especially at Bristol this past weekend, and he ranked this one as one of the biggest victories of his career. And he's from Florida also, and in the 100-lap super late model race, he had to really overcome a lot of things. He got in front, outraced Casey Roderick there toward the end of the race, and also outraced Rusty Wallace's son, Stephen. And Stephen Wallace helped him along the line, too, because early on in the race, he had to have some help from Stephen to kind of spot what was wrong with one of his tires, and they were able to get that solved. And when they were able to do that, he was able to go to the front and take a victory in that race. But, Chris, I saw some really great racing down there on Saturday night at Bristol Motor Speedway. If it wasn't the late model series, it was the super late model race, just a little bit a different step above what the pro late model is. And then I also saw some great street stock racing, too. I mean, these are street stock cars. These are like your old Monte Carlos back from the 80s that Earnhardt and some of the other drivers, Tim Richmond and some of those Darrell Waltrip used to race. They really had that Monte Carlo style body that they raced really well. And I think one of the highlights, though, of the entire evening was the compact. And that's these little 4- and 6-cylinder cars. And I'm telling you, they really raced around the track on Saturday night. They had some great features and some little heat races, features to be able to narrow down the field. And they had their big finishing race right there toward the very end. It was a great night of racing. And if people missed it, just keep on hoping. It's going to be back in Bristol next year. They're missing out on some great racing.
How big is it for these drivers to get wins and impressive placements outside of wins at this track? I mean, it's you're racing on a NASCAR track, one of the more celebrated NASCAR tracks on the circuit, and you mentioned that some of the competitors they're not guys who necessarily think that they'll take this win and maybe get the attention of the right people and move up the ranks. They're just having fun. They're paying the bills, and there may be some drivers there who very well are trying to work their way up the ladder, so to speak. But just put in the context, how big is this to have success at this event?
It's huge. It's just a huge thing because some of these guys may go and race this race at Bristol and just literally say they may never hit the victory lane up there on top of the building there at Bristol Motor Speedway there in the infield. But they can actually say to somebody or say to their grandkids or say to somebody else down the line, I raced at Bristol. I raced at the last great Coliseum, and I raced on those high things. And Bristol, who knows, in 100 years, 150 years, if we're all still here, and you're still talking to great-grandchildren at that time, you're still talking about one of these tracks that was just iconic, and that's what Bristol was. And some of these guys will win, and they'll never make the step up. Now, we had Rafael Lessard last year who came from Quebec. He's looking at moving up. That's where he's looking at going. He's looking at moving up, going into the NASCAR rank. Who knows? He might even be going into IndyCar or whatever we're going to be dealing with here in a couple of years once they make the car change, when they get that Generation 7 body style that they're going to settle on. But, they're looking, some of those drivers are looking at bigger and better things. Some of these drivers are like just right out of your own hometown. They may be from a Waynesboro. They may be from a Wise, Virginia. They may be from, a small little town in Kentucky that no one's ever heard of unless you really look deep down on the map. And these guys say, I want to drive at Bristol. And when they get the chance to drive at Bristol, it's just an even greater experience for them. And it's it's beyond words when you go and you win at Bristol. That's just something that no one will ever take away from you. And that's just huge for some of these drivers.
I can only imagine. So that's awesome for those guys. So let's now switch gears and talk some NASCAR. We'll kind of go back and forth talking NASCAR and some other auto racing too, but let's review Pocono. Kyle Busch had a Kyle Busch night. He whined, he argued, and he won. That's a Kyle Busch triple threat right there. So take us into Pocono and Kyle Busch getting the win.
Kyle Busch all season has been telling everybody, I hate this auto setup. I hate this aero setup. I hate this entire package that they have put down here for the season and so forth. But it seems like every time that he goes and he whines and he complains about this stuff, he ends up winning. And that's a great testament to him as a driver. And I'm not your biggest Kyle Busch fan out there, because there are some times that I think that Kyle Busch, much like our President of the United States, needs to tone some of his language down sometimes when he gets on Twitter or when he gets in front of the media. But Kyle Busch has got the mouth, and he's also got the driving ability to be able to back it up, unlike the President of the United States. And that's another story. We won't talk about that. But, he's got the ability to be able to back it up when he's out on the track. And that's what he's been able to do. And he really gave a lot of praise this weekend to his race team. But more than anything else, he said that his guys on pit road were awesome. And that's what made the difference for him being in this race. I mean, if you take a chance to listen to the radioactive parts, you might hear it on YouTube sometimes, the actual transmission between the spotters and the driver, and then, the pit crew, and then also the crew chief sitting on top of the box down there in the pit. You will find out it is an obscenity-laced conversation usually with Kyle Busch. And if the car is not working, he lets you know it. He tells you. He says it's the biggest piece of crap he's ever put out on the racetrack. But he fusses, and then they settle him down, or someone gets him settled down. It could be Joe Gibbs for that matter. And they turn around and they get things going for that car in a positive manner to where he's able to, save face and come out with a top 10 win, or, come out with a win like he did this past weekend at Pocono. Here's the thing that was so funny. After Charlotte last week, this rumor started traveling around. I didn't catch it until this past week. But Kyle Busch had supposedly told a lot of his team members, or had told people down in the pit, I quit. I quit for Joe Gibbs race. Probably could have been the biggest mistake of his life if he had ever done that. But that was the frustration level in Kyle Busch this past weekend. But if anybody needs to be having a frustration level along the lines maybe of a Kyle Busch, it's got to be more than anything else Kyle Larson. Because Kyle Larson picked up 2 stage wins during his Pocono race, and he still finished 26th. And he thought that the team really did good, but all it took for him was to have a tire go down, boom, he went into the wall, and his day was finished. I mean, he just had bad luck all the way around. Then you had Alex Bowman, who had some really great top 10, top 5 finishes here in the last couple of weeks. He wasn't happy at all. He said they had a good car, they had handling issues off and on, but they just did not go the way that they intended toward the front. and they ended up finishing 15th. So, there were a lot of different things that happened this past weekend. Daniel Hemrick, who's a rookie this year on the NASCAR Monster Cup circuit, at one time, he was leading the race down towards the very end, and everybody else was kind of coming in pit because they were going to need fuel to be able to make it the rest of the way, or maybe some tires. And Hemrick just couldn't keep up. Hemrick was racing there at the beginning. Here comes Kyle Busch through the field, and before it was over with, Hemrick had to give up the lead to Kyle Busch, and Kyle Busch eventually went on to win the race. And Eric Almirola had some bad luck as well. William Byron, who won the pole, ended up finishing ninth. You had a lot of regulars in there kind of on the outside looking in. Chase Elliott finishing fourth, and then Eric Jones rebounding back from his terrible race at Charlotte. He ended up finishing third. So one way or the other, you either were moving up or you were moving down in the standings this past week at Pocono. It's that kind of track.
Yeah, I'm lucky that there's no recording of me when I'm working, because Kyle Busch might blush if that was the case. So we covered the winners and losers from Pocono. We'll talk about Michigan coming up, but I wanted to work in one thing before we talk about Michigan. The Tri-Cities Media Challenge Round 3, and among others represented Bristol Dragway and Augusta Free Press. I guess, hey Rod, are you gonna do us a solid down there and maybe bring home some hardware for us?
I'm going to try this time. I really am. This is one of those things that gets me. And last year it got me. I made it into the semis the first year of it, and I don't know. I guess I'm like Kyle Busch in one way. I blamed the car last year. I just didn't feel like I had a good enough takeoff with the car. I think we were racing Malibus last year, and to me, a front-wheel drive, I'm sorry, I mean this with all respect, but it's sort of like your old man's car. If it's got that front-wheel drive, it's going to just take off, and you're wondering, am I going to ever get up to speed in this thing? Whereas I get in the Camaro, and I can feel instant power the minute I put my foot on the pedal. But I'm hoping to this time around. I ran into somebody today, and they had heard that I was going to be in the Tri-City Media Challenge, and one of the local sports directors at one of the Tri-City stations, they asked me, they said, is he going to be there? And I won't mention any names or anything. So I really don't want this to get to the point where we start sounding like a WWE broadcast or podcast here. But she asked me, she said to me, are you going to take so-and-so down this time? And I'm like, yeah, if I can, I'm going to do that. So that kind of inspired me. Somebody else had come off, there, and they said to me, are you going to take so-and-so down? So then I was thinking in a kind of a WWE way, I'm going to have to go in there and get my mind focused on what I'm doing tomorrow on Wednesday and be able to pull this off, hopefully, if I can. There's some tough competition. These guys who are sports writers and sports directors, they love the opportunity to get out there on that track and be able to make at least 100, 120 miles an hour down that straightaway there at Thunder Valley. So I'm just one of those guys, and I'm just very fortunate to be able to have a chance to do that tomorrow.
I've worked in the wrestling business, Rod. I'll talk for you. I'll be your Paul Heyman. I'll be your advocate. You just be Brock Lesnar and go out there and be the beast incarnate. You take them all down, and I'll clean up with the trash talk. So good luck with that tomorrow.
Well, I can work for you now because you didn't say one of the names that I would have dreaded hearing from you, and that was Jim Cornette.
Well, I could have been your cornet too, but I'll be your advocate. I'll get the butts in the seats. All you gotta do is win the hardware. So that's tomorrow. We'll expect to hear some good news. Hopefully, we'll hear some good news. But good luck with that. That's an awesome opportunity, and looking forward to hearing how that goes for you. So now we'll go back. We'll talk some more NASCAR. That was fun. We'll talk some more NASCAR. Michigan this week in NASCAR. So what can we expect as we head out back towards the Midwest?
Well, when we go to Michigan, you're talking about a large speedway, 2.5-mile track. It's nowhere near a Talladega, but it's built along the lines of a Talladega. It's kind of a Daytona thrown together. But this track presents, I guess, a lot of challenges to these drivers in a lot more different way, I think, than maybe what they encounter in some of these other tracks, especially a Daytona or Talladega, because to me it seems like for the last few years when you get to a Michigan track and you race at Brooklyn, Michigan, one, you're there in the kind of like the awe of Detroit because you've got Ford there that's going to be heavily campaigning there about the cars. You've got GM, who has Chevrolet there. They're going to be campaigning for their end of the bargain with Chevrolet cars. But then you also have the outsider out of that. You have that outsider in Toyota. And Toyota has really just run away with it since they come into the sport. It took them a little while to get there. So there's a lot of pressure on some of the drivers, some of the race teams. And, some of these teams are even starting to make noise, so to speak, as to maybe where they might be going next year. Some big rumors started out here just in the last week that Richard Petty and Mario Andretti, or not Mario Andretti, but Michael Andretti, were thinking about combining and becoming a race team together within the next few years and possibly building Honda cars. Now, that was one of the rumors that came out. That would be another sort of, I guess, a little bit of a hit on GM and Ford, especially coming out of Detroit. You're racing in that backyard, but these are the kind of tracks that it's going to bend some kind of attention to some degree with some of these car owners and also with these manufacturers. That if somebody's not happy with one of these cars, they're going to end up going to somebody else. And we've got that Generation 7 car coming up here in the next couple of years, and we've already been hearing the rumors too that one of the IndyCar providers, the people that provide the bodies and so forth, has been commissioned, or at least is being talked to by NASCAR on developing that Generation 7 body style. Now, I don't know what that's going to mean before it's over with, if the cars will look less NASCAR and look more Indy. Who knows what this is going to be. But when they go into Michigan, they're either going to be on good relations and good terms with some of these car manufacturers, or they're going to be looking to maybe leave before it's over with. Now, with Hendrick and Richard Childress and some of them, no, that's not a thing right now. They're into Chevrolet. They're stuck in the GM brand. But you got some people that are kind of floating there, wondering where we're going to go to. And if Ford or GM doesn't pick us up, maybe Toyota will pick us up. And it's sort of like what Mark Truex had to deal with there, of not having any kind of funding coming up and then winning your first NASCAR championship, but then getting some help along the way from just getting break from Toyota. That kind of helped them out. But when we get to Michigan this week, I think it's going to be a determination of, to me, fuel mileage, and also considering how the weather is going to be. If it's going to be humid, it's going to kind of slow the cars down maybe just a tad bit. It's going to force them to run a little bit. They'll get a little bit more horsepower out of them, depending on how much tape they have to put on or take off. But always, it seems like a Michigan race is always determined, especially by fuel mileage. And we'll have to see how that pans out for them. And to me, I think the person that's going to play into the hands of possibly winning this race, I don't think it's going to be Kyle Busch. I think it's going to probably be Brad Keselowski, because he's one of these guys. He's from the Northwest sort of area around in there, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Michigan. He's got a strong following, especially with some of the fans up in there. But for him, he's going to go, and I think he's going to be the one that you're going to have to look out for, because he usually runs very well. And besides that, this is the captain's track. This is Roger Penske's track that he had commissioned here several years ago, many years ago. So I'm sure that he wants a good showing for the captain. He'd love to come away with a win, and especially kind of break out from Kyle Busch's shadow right now, especially in a track like Michigan. So it could be a very big race this coming Sunday when they race at Michigan.
Good insight there. We're going to look ahead for the last part of our segment here to next weekend, Father's Day weekend. Thunder Valley Nationals, NHRA coming to town. Get us ready for that. I know we'll talk more about this next week, but what can we think as we're thinking a week and a half ahead to the Thunder Valley Nationals?
Well, you're going to be seeing some very tight competition right now, and some very tight racing right now with some of these drivers. Ron Capps last week, he had to get in on a provisional, get into one of his racing classes when he gets there and so forth. And there's an article that's coming out about him that I'm going to hopefully be able to get to you, and we could run it here in the next couple of days or something in regard to Ron Capps, talking about the changes that he had to make this year in order for them to get in contention where they're at. He's running a new body style this year. he's running that Hellcat body that they have from Chrysler, from Dodge, and so forth. And so he's looking to get back and keep and be consistent in the there, especially in the victory lane and everything at Thunder Valley. But you got some really good drivers coming into this one now. You've got a rookie driver coming in that's going to be appearing there that races with Jon Force Racing. He's going to be there, and as a matter of fact, I think we'll have a chance to meet him tomorrow. And he's so young and he's so new, I've even forgot his name, and so I apologize about it, but I'll add that as a write-up. But, they've got a great driver out of Jon Force Racing with him. He's a rookie this year, and then you've got none other than that. You've got Antron Brown. You've also got one of the Force girls in there, Brittany Force. She's racing. Force 14 has already kind of stepped away from drag racing this year. It'll be interesting. Clay Millican always brings down the house when he comes to Bristol, because even though he's located almost the entire state of Tennessee away from the track, he considers Bristol Dragway one of his best tracks that he races on. And just another little bit of information there. The first year that I covered the NHRA race at Bristol, Clay Millican won on Father's Day, and ironically won on the same day that he lost his son, probably about 3 years ago. And for him, that race was a race of, so to speak, vindication, that some people thought he would never be able to do that again. He would never be able to race and win races. But Clay Millican has just picked up more and more with just popularity. He's as country as it gets, and they had him, I believe, the other night at Chicago Cubs baseball game, wearing a jersey out onto the field. I think he participated in the first pitch for one of the National League games the other night. So Clay Millican's picking up an even greater fan base. So that's some of the drivers we'll be encountering next week when we go to Bristol Dragway for the NHRA Thunder Valley National.
Looking forward to that, of course. Looking forward to hearing about the Tri-Cities Media Challenge. Good luck there. And, we'll have a busy next couple weeks. I want to thank Rod for his time as we conclude our podcast. Thank you for listening. And everybody, have a great day.